Welcome to Does It Make a Sound, the podcast where we ask if an indie band pours their heart and soul into making a record, but nobody's around to hear it, does it make a sound? I'm your host, Dustin Owens, and joining me today are my fellow Fall Down Trees bandmates, Porkchop Branch. How you doing, Porkchop?
Doing good. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks for being here. And we also have the very talkative Nolin McAlister. Hey, Nolin, how are you?
How's it going?
All right, in the first season of Does It Make a Sound, we're going to go through our debut album, Night Terrors, and this is Episode 1, Hand of God. Make sure to like and subscribe to Does It Make a Sound. Do it right now. Don't wait. Just go ahead. You're going to like it, I promise. So go ahead right now, like, subscribe. Go ahead and give us 5 stars. Like, why not? You can also find us on all of the podcast platforms. So if the one you're on is not your favorite, just go find another one. We're going to be there. Also, go listen to Night Terrors. So I don't know what you guys think, but we're going to go through each song on Night Terrors, episode by episode. It may be fun to listen to the album before you listen to the podcast, but it also may be fun to be introduced to the album through the podcast and then listen to it in its entirety once it's done. But that's going to take a long time. You know, it's going to be months. So, I don't know. Go listen to it now, right?
Yeah, I think go ahead and listen to it.
All right. It's out there. Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Tidal, all the places. So go find it. Night Terrors by Fall Down Trees. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. This is a presentation of Fall Down Trees, so if you want to find out more information about this podcast, find Fall Down Trees on all of the social platforms. We're also proud partners of Guttersville Records. So Guttersville is a collective of independent artists, very much like us. We all kind of work together, share our audiences, cross-promote, and then give each other ideas, tips, and tricks, like help along with the making of records and also distribution and all of the other madness that we have to go through to get a record out there, and make sure that people hear it too. You're going to have links to all of the Guttersville social profiles. You can also go to guttersvillerecords.com. But all the stuff I just named off, the links are in the show notes. So drop down there and check it out. Here on episode 1, we're going to talk about the very first song from the Night Terrors record, Hand of God. So I think one important thing to note is that Night Terrors is a concept album, but the songs were not written with that concept in mind. I kind of went back as we were talking about making a record, and I made a list. I think we ended up with, 40 songs, something like that we would have felt comfortable about putting on an album at that point in time. And then I kind of started looking at those songs in ways that they could be pieced together to make a concept or to tell a story. But it really wasn't until we started making this record that a full-fledged concept that we're going to talk about here actually came to be. So with all of the songs, they date back to different eras as well, right? So for this song, it looks like I went back through, I don't really keep track of this. So the best I could tell, it's before August of 2022. I had recordings. They weren't initial recordings, but I did have recordings of this song from August of 2022. I think it might be a little older than that. It's definitely kind of a post-COVID song. So when I originally wrote this song, I was kind of having a hard time at work. I was tired of being in a public-facing job where I had to deal with people and talk to people all the time. I was thinking about quitting the job. I'd been tested for COVID so many times over and over and was just kind of exhausted with the whole thing, and really just missing time outside was a big part of it too. And, that's kind of one of the interesting things with COVID is even though there were so many very negative aspects of it, I spent a lot of time outdoors that I didn't get to spend otherwise, working in my garden, but, also hiking and having we did that a lot before, but it was the only thing to do then. And kind of in that post-COVID world where everything started to get back together, kind of back to normal, I realized that there were some parts of that I really missed. And so that's a lot of where this song came from initially. I've got some clips here. So Porkchop, Nolin, I don't think y'all have heard most of these early ones that I'm going to play.
Okay.
Or if you did, it was just I sent it to you like the night that I wrote the song or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it'll be the first time hearing these for a while. I was a little bit surprised. So I think that this is the clip that I'm going to play here is from the night that I wrote the song. So I think usually I do like a little what I call a song sketch as I write it or right when I finish writing the lyrics and everything, and this one is labeled as sketch. So let's go back and let's listen to Hand of God from the very first night of its creation.
Think I'll head on down the roadway. Nothing left to do, nothing left to prove, nothing left to say. It's not like you gave two shits anyway. Think I'll head on down the road. Think I'll take care of myself this time. Reconnect with friends, let the wounded men find a space that's mine. The one alive can say I didn't try. I think I'll take care of myself. Trade it all in for a song and some rowdy friends that'll sing along, or a night out neath the stars to watch the hand of God and rest my weary heart.
All right, so Hand of God from the night it was written. What'd you think?
Really like the sound of nature in the background.
Yeah, that helps, doesn't it?
That really is good. You know, it's funny because that you can hear what the song will become if you've listened to the album, but that's a much different take on. I wasn't expecting to hear that. That's a very folky country.
Bob Dylan, right?
It's a Bob Dylan style song, and what it turned into. I mean, the words are still there. The chord changes are still there, but it sounds so different. It's funny if you know, I shouldn't be surprised because some people will take a song that's in one genre and they'll cover it in another genre, and it's the same song, but it sounds so different. And the sound there is just so, it's kind of shocking, to be honest with you, what we get with the final product.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's testament to how much a song can evolve. And the funny thing is, like, I think it's really good. Like, listening to that, I think if I was a lazier, less, I say lazy, that's almost like giving myself credit for something that's an issue that I have. Like, I could have just let it be that song, and it still would have been a good song, right?
Yeah. I think what happened with the album, I mean, you know, this is not, you know, self-aggrandizing here, but I mean, there was a very ambitious project. I've never been involved in something that's so ambitious. Most stuff is straightforward. There's nothing wrong with straightforward. I'm a big fan of that. But it was very ambitious. We really went outside the box of our comfort zone on so many levels. But it's funny, you know, you put that ambition in there and it changes it. Honestly, I think it's for the better. I mean, yeah. I mean that is a great song, what we just heard, but
well, it's definitely a thing that we learned in this process, and this is something that I carry through in songwriting and just about like everything I do. At least I try to. But good enough isn't good enough, right? Like when you get to a spot where you say that's pretty good, you know, that's good enough. Usually then I break it. Sometimes it's very frustrating for me and everybody else, but break it and try to make it even better than it is at that point. And I kind of think that's where this was coming from. You also mentioned the cicadas in the background. Like
Yeah.
this is one thing I really miss, and this ties into the record too. Like part of this album and the concept was it came at a really difficult time in my life. Post divorce, I had to sell my house, lost my house, and I had lost my job previously and gotten laid off, and so kind of everything fell apart. And making this record was me kind of putting these pieces back together. I moved into this shed that everybody can hear in the reverberations in the room right now, I'm sure. It's the same shed that we're recording this in, that we recorded Night Terrors in.
The Plywood Palace.
The Plywood Palace, that's right. The Plywood Palace of Sin,
that's,
is that?
Yeah, that's right.
Not so much. But yeah, so like this shed, a lot of this album sort of surrounds that loss, and like the idea being the album starts with me walking into the shed at the end of the night, and then at the end of the record, that's me leaving the shed the next morning. One of my favorite places at my old house, which we can actually see from here, it's also a difficult thing, is that, you know, I moved I moved into a shed, but I can still see the backyard of my old house.
Fence.
Yeah, it's across the fence. But I sat in the carport and played my guitar when the kids were in the bed, and so many of those like little voice notes and stuff, you hear those cicadas in the background, or you hear rain falling, and it sort of transports me back to that place too. So, you know, it is interesting with this song in particular, and the subject matter of the song, it wasn't really written about that, but it fits so well into that concept, you know, in hindsight. That opening line there, so the song, the first title for the song was Two Shits. And you hear it like the very first version, the first night, it's not like you gave two shits anyway. I think that was the jumping off point for the song. That I think I'll head on down the road away, and it's not like you gave two shits anyway, were the first two lines that I wrote for the entire song. So I've had people suggest that lyric should be changed so it was more easily played on the radio and for more friendly ears. And I'm like, that's the whole song is inspired by Two Shits. I did sing it as was suggested by a fan as 2 cents at the gig the other night.
It works.
Yeah, but
it's not the same.
It's not the same. It doesn't have the same bite. There's another line in there. No one alive can say I didn't try. That verse changed to I'll never fail if I never try. And I guess that's like a take on the, you know, you'll never win if you never try.
Right.
And it shows the logical fallacy that that idiom really is, because you can definitely fail if you never try. That is a line that I just thought sounded cool, and I never quite understood what it meant. But I hope that it leaves a certain amount of interpretation out there for other people to make it feel. You'll never fail if you never try. Try to take care of yourself. But there is a little bit of nihilism in that, and I think that's in this song too. And then I also noticed in that very first version, I say watch the hand of God. I am very glad that I changed that to witness.
Yeah, witness is that I have to give you kudos on that. Watch works, but witness is a much stronger phrase, and the word witness too, mentioning the word God, it kind of goes hand in hand, so to speak.
Perfect. And hand of God.
Right.
It all ties together.
Yeah.
That is one cool thing about a concept that we sort of realized, is that the concept doesn't have to exist, but you start making it up in your head as you start to realize like the connections of the songs and how it all ties together. So it's not like there was a ton of forethought in it. It just, like, it worked. It was serendipitous.
Yeah, you know, it's a lot easier to put the songs together as a concept than trying to write a concept album all the way through, I would think.
I would imagine. All right, so let's go ahead and play a next version. So this is another version of the song that I came across that blew my mind. I did not remember this at all. So anyway, this one is, I called it Hand of God Rewrite. So I guess I was deciding to change the feel of the tune, and this was a different idea that I had.
Nothing left to do, nothing left to prove, nothing left to say. It's not like you gave two shits anyway. I guess I'll head on down the road. Guess I tried to do my best most days. Too stubborn to leave, too numb to grieve, too dumb to pray. Wouldn't have made any difference anyway. At least I tried to do my best. I traded all in for a song and some rowdy friends that'll sing along, or a night out neath the stars. Witness the hand of God, rest my weary heart.
All right, so there's the rewrite, kind of a like, what is that?
Somebody's running a saw or something.
Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah, so it's kind of got like a leave it in.
Yeah.
That's how it is in the shed. You hear everything going on outside. Tom Petty, like Heartland rock sort of vibe, like maybe a little like Lou Reed in there too, but definitely a whole different like feel to the music.
You know, one of the things I noticed though is you're starting to do hammer-ons and some of the syncopation on the chords. You're not quite there yet, but you're working into that. It's much different than the first take we heard.
It is, and you're exactly right. Like those little hammer-ons and the syncopations end up being in the fingerpick version of the tune that comes, even though it's still radically different. There are, between those first two versions, there are bits and pieces that are like carrying over, and I think it's cool to hear the evolution. The melody changes there too in the verse. I don't know if you noticed it, but it goes to that nothing left to do, nothing left to prove.
Yeah.
Like it does that little climb, and that also holds over until the last version of the song, and wasn't really in the first one.
And I noticed your where you're singing at. I don't know if the keys are different from the first one or this one. That may have something to do with it, but it was much lower register on your voice overall in the first version we heard. This one you're starting to get up a little bit because you sing it a little. It's not high, but you're singing it higher by the end when we get to Night Terrors.
Yeah, that's a good thing to note. I didn't think about that. So I'm almost certain that I would have written that song in the key of C. And the reason I say that is because I almost never write a song with a capo on the guitar. So what'll happen is I'll like write a song in an open standard tuning, and then after I write it, I start moving that capo around to figure out where it works best with my voice. And I'd almost guarantee that first night I was playing in C. I don't know this. And then that one I'm probably playing in D. And this is something that'll actually pop up in a few minutes too. The demo version of the song is in D, but the final version of the song's in E flat. And that it all like my voice changes in each one of those keys to be able to get to a different thing. And there you can kind of tell I'm trying to be more anthemic in the chorus. And, and so I probably move that capo up to be able to sing with a little more, ass behind it.
Well, and you need to note this, podcast listeners, that Dustin is not afraid of a key change. Nolan and I can
attest to that.
He can attest to that.
Yeah, they don't make capos for upright basses and saxophones, do they, fellas?
No, not at all.
Yeah, and especially when you're making up 90% of what you play.
Right. It's all off the top of your head anyway. And so then I'm like, all right, let's change a key. It's not like you can just make an adjustment to the chart.
Yeah.
For sure. Another thing you noticed in the background there, you heard some Arlo barking like baby. Arlo's my dog, my blue heeler. You'll probably hear him snort, or in one of my famous live streams, farted right in the middle of the stream. So he's right under my feet right now. And he was a little puppy then, a little squeaky bark. And then you also heard Puppy Towns, my little guy who sings on Modern Prometheus and Pegasus on the record with his sister Emmy Lou. He was a little fellow, which makes me think maybe it dates back a little earlier than I originally thought when I wrote the song. But I did you're talking about that sort of, I think they call it cinema verite. That's probably not the correct pronunciation, but like this idea of the film of life. Like you get a little bit of this in these like home recordings. And so in that particular recording there at the end, Arlo and Towns pop back in to make an appearance. And once again, it kind of transports me back. So I'm going to play that clip.
With our hands up
Hey,
to
Daddy.
God.
Hey, Towns.
I wish that'd be crazy, Daddy.
I think he said, "Don't be crazy, Daddy." This is what he said. Arlo piercing our ears with that little puppy bark. I'll try
Yeah.
to keep that down on the podcast so I don't scare everybody to death or have their dogs start barking like crazy. But yeah, I love that, man. That's so cool. And that was actually before the end of the song, so I didn't actually play the last verse in that demo recording.
I love it.
All right, so I started work on the demos in the summer of 2023. And so at that point in time, we were in a band. We still had a drummer, and like we were coming back out. We were playing shows that summer. We played a lot of, I say a lot, like, I don't know, 6 or 8 shows over the course of that summer, which was a lot for us at that point in time.
Yeah.
We'd sort of revived everything again, kind of as my marriage had fallen apart. I had some extra time and went through a couple of different lineups of ways we were wanting to do it and a name change. But eventually we landed back on the 3 of us, plus a drummer. And so I really wanted to make this record. It was and moving into the shed, like I got to set up my studio so we could record in a way that we had never been able to before. And so the original idea with the demos is that I was going to use those because most of these songs were not songs that we were playing live. And so we were going to kind of have to write and arrange them as we were recording them, which gives us a lot of creative freedom. We didn't know it yet, but it would give us a lot of creative freedom that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And so I was going to make these demo versions that I could give to all of you guys so you could figure out parts and work on your parts independently before we came in and recorded. And that they might actually end up being scratch tracks for the final record, which they didn't. We did try it one time kind of unsuccessfully, but this was the first time that I sat down and I didn't have the headphones I have now. I think these were the only studio expense actually, or the headphones for the whole recording process. But it was the first time I had sat down like with a good microphone and good headphones and like really set up to record an instrument and record the vocals and could really hear myself in a way that I've never been able to before. And it changed stuff. I realized that the issue is more I think it's hilarious that they're sawing wood during the fall down trees. It doesn't make a sound podcast. I don't know if everybody else can hear that, but it is hilarious. And so it really changed the way I like approached making the demos. And I realized that my issue's probably more with my ears than my voice. So it gave me a lot of confidence too. And it's also when I started thinking of the album, like as a concept album, as one night in the shed. So this song was originally planned to be the closing track on the record. And one of the reasons there, first of all, is that the leaving part before the concept was fully formed of a night in the shed, the leaving part seemed the logical place to end the song, right? Heading on down the road away. But the other part was there was an interesting last verse that didn't really tie into the rest of the verses of the song. It was sort of obscure in a way. And then there's a refrain at the end of that I thought would have been like a great like big build up to the end of the record. So when I did the original demos, the official demos, this was track number 10. All right, so I'll let you hear it since I'm talking about it anyway. So let's play the last verse, and this is from the official demos.
up to the sky were raised. In the blink of an eye, we all started to cry as the pact was made. Then we all began to levitate, with our hands up to the sky.
So that was from the official demos for Night Terrors. One of the first things that gets me is the sticky harmonica reed.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure in that harmonica that reed is still sticky, and I haven't fixed it yet. Probably just need to buy a new one. That I wrote. So I'd never played harmonica with that song before, and I wrote that harmonica part while I was recording the demo, and I had better like takes. But when that reed like stuck like that and wouldn't let go, like that was kind of a changing moment for the record, because that's like, this has always sort of been my thing, like warts and all. Like I like those real life moments in any kind of performance or recording. But that was one where it sounded so much cooler, even though it was screwed up. Yeah. And it just adds like a grittiness there that I love.
Yeah, I know all about that.
Right?
Sticky reeds.
Yeah. That was cool. I didn't mean to do that.
I can't replicate it.
Yeah, it was not supposed to sound like that.
I would not be able to do that again.
I'd totally forgotten about that verse because it got dropped along the way. I totally forgot about that.
It didn't make as much sense once that song. So kind of once I looked at it as a night in the shed, then heading on down the road away was me walking into the shed and like away from the brave face that I was putting on in the real world. And kind of the first song of the night of just like, I wish I was somewhere else too. Like I wish I was spending a night beneath the stars. But the last verse kind of like, once again, it sort of has almost a mystical type vibe, the guru and the levitation and all of that. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense at the front of the record. I do think it's a good verse. It's kind of like the Thunder Rolls. Remember when the music video came out for the third verse of that song? I was so excited. I was like, man, we get another verse of this song we love. So maybe people will feel the same way about this one. We should bust out verse 3 in the live show. So anyway, yeah. So once that song moved, that verse disappeared. We also lost our drummer. So after,
we lost a verse and a drummer.
A verse and a drummer. So after we did the official demos and passed them around, our drummer had to go get a real job and couldn't balance it with the band work. So we decided to be a drummerless band at that point in time and to move forward without a drummer, because drummers are stupid, and that is our official band take on drummers. So we needed to come up with different ways of like incorporating that rhythm ourselves. But we decided we could figure that out, because drums also aren't a real instrument. So even though we're all real musicians, surely we could figure out how to do this. So when we first came in, after that happened, we started looking more than playing gigs. We wanted to make a record. So we immediately like got to work. Once we made this decision, Fall Down Trees are a 3-piece band. We've been playing together for 10 years, at least longer now, right? Each of us either together or some version of us. We all trust each other to show up to band practice, to know the songs, to be able to adapt, to get weird with it when we want to, like enjoy hanging out with each other. Let's get in there. Let's make this record. The first thing that we did was tried to record over the top of the demos. And so when we did that, one of the first things that we did when we tried to do that, before we realized that was not going to be a good idea, was we actually got a sax take on this song. So one of the things about this record is we did way more stuff than made it onto the album. It was very much a let's throw everything at the wall and then scrape off what, it's a work grotesque, right? Like, let's throw it all out there and then let's scrape it back until we have exactly what it is that we're trying to put out there. And so there's probably going to be sax versions of just about every song that we can play. And the thing that you'll notice, once again, is it's the good enough isn't good enough philosophy.
Yep.
Like the sax is really freaking good. Like it's I would just sit and listen to Nolin play sax over this chord progression all day, and it would be fun. But when we cut down to 2 verses, we knew we wanted that harmonica solo in the middle. The harmonica kind of has its own sort of representation. At this point in time too, like I started thinking of the harmonica kind of like the wind. And it only pops onto the record in the first song and the last song. And it's kind of like being blown into this different space, which is kind of inside the shed, but also inside the main character's head. And so the harmonica felt very important in those first 2 songs. So there really wasn't space for the saxophone anyway. And we figured out once we cut it back that, the song worked better without it. So no offense to Nolin at all. The sax playing was great, but had to go. So anyway, we'll give you a taste of it now, though. This was what I called the first take tracking. This was when we tried to track the record over the top of the demos.
Think I'll head on down the road a ways.
So anyway, sounded really good though. Good job, Nolin.
Yeah.
That whole take wasn't for nothing. You actually got a little snippet out into the world.
Yep. I think then is kind of when we're like, do we want this to be a saxophone album or like an album? Because I think like halfway through it, I was like, I'm playing a lot on this album. But kind of like I do with gigs. Is like when we first started gigging together, it's like, all right, we'll throw a saxophone solo in.
Just to give you something to do.
Yeah, just to give me something to do, so I'm just not sitting there. But like with an album, it doesn't. The songs are already kind of short. You don't.
Right.
You'll hear me again eventually.
That's right. We'll get around to it, and not only that, but it gives it more punch when we do hear you. If your ears aren't as used to it, and that's something else we figured out. There was a lot of that, like cutting. I think there was a few songs there towards the end where we decided to cut the sax. And then there was one moment that we'll talk to at a later episode where you were pretty determined that it needed to get added back, and you were very much right in that regard. But on this one, not a whole lot lost without it, but it is nice to hear that you had a good piece put together. Good job, Nolin.
I do my best.
So we recorded, once we started like recording for real, once we were like, all right, we need to do this whole thing from scratch again. This was February of 2024. So right around, almost a year full circle to start making this podcast. And this was the first song that we recorded because it was track number 1 at that point in time. Once we're about to start playing some stuff from the final recordings, and I think it is important to note that this song has slightly different sound quality than the rest of the record. We didn't know what we were doing. Yeah. I would still argue that we don't know what we're doing.
We know a little bit more, but we know that we don't know.
And we know how to do it our way, which is not the right way according to YouTube.
Yeah.
But it's the way that worked for us. And in all honesty, there's more podcast professionalism in this room than there is recording engineer professionalism. We've got more radio years in our pocket than we do.
You two are professional yappers.
That's exactly right.
As the young children say.
So when we got in here, there were a few things. There was a sound. I wanted the album to sound like the concept. I wanted it to sound like it was coming from inside the listener's head. And that's kind of a hard thing to figure out. You can't type that in Google. How to make records sound like it's inside my head.
George Martin has no notes on that.
That puts you on a list.
You can, but it's like going to WebMD. You got 2 days to live.
So the biggest production goal was space, right? And this became a thing too, where we realized the space is the shed, and the shed became an instrument. And it became a player on the record too, which we'll talk about in later episodes as well. But for right now, like the production goal was space. I wanted it to have that space and to have a sound like it was coming from inside. I didn't much know how to do that or how to try to do it. But those first, like when I first started working on this song and the next song, Night Terrors, which we'll talk about in the next episode, those were kind of the same night. And they're like vastly different tunes, like laid back acoustic versus heavy rock. And I sort of tested these ways of using mics to try to accomplish that space and to get that feeling. And the way that I did it was I started with a metronome, and I recorded everything to a metronome, guitar and vocals, just like I did with the demo. This is the point on this song that I decided I was moving it up to E flat from D.
There's your key change.
Right? And there's nothing you can do about it now. Like, once they're in there, it's in E flat now, forever. And then the percussion. So those were kind of the three things that I brought to the table when you guys would show up at the next practice to be able to record your parts on the songs. I used a condenser in stereo. So putting two condenser microphones at that 90-degree angle. So they create a 90-degree box, and then you point the angle of the box at the thing that you want to capture, and you take the track from one microphone and the track from another microphone, and you can pan them apart to create a stereo sound. All right, so this is what I started with to be able to accomplish getting space in the room and space in the instruments. At least that's how it was going to work in my head, and it ended up actually working out that way. The other thing is, what do we play for drums? Because we don't have a drummer.
We don't have a drummer.
And we don't have drums. Like, we didn't, this is even before we had the cajon.
This is PC, pre-cajon.
Yeah, and this is also the PC for Prez guitar, Porkchop for President. I don't know if folks know this, but I used to be Porkchop as well. Porkchop 2, they called me. And I ran for president in 2008, and Barack Obama kicked my ass. So didn't do it again, decided to get out of politics and to go into other very successful ventures like radio. And being in a band, which lands me living in a shed.
I'd like to thank Dustin Owens for not staying in the race any longer. Appreciate that.
Pretty good job.
Thanks.
So anyway, I had this guitar. It's a guitar that somebody painted for me that said Porkchop for President, kind of a wall hanger, not something that I played. And so I pulled it down, and that's what I did the rhythm for the very first track on. So let's let you hear that isolated. All right, so honestly, it sounds better in isolation than I remember it sounding when I recorded it. I bet I spent hours moving those microphones around to get it to sound that good.
I don't know if you remember this or not, but when you played that back for me, that's a very 1950s thing. There's a lot of guys from the 50s that would
rockabilly
use
stuff too, right?
Guitar cases, their knees, whatever they had. And the one that comes to mind is Buddy Holly with the song "Every Day."
Oh yeah,
he had a drummer, which is against our rules, but he had a drummer, and his drummer beat on his knees. And there's another song where they beat on the top of a guitar case.
I love it,
and it gives you the rhythm you need, but it also, that song or "Every Day" by Buddy Holly doesn't need a full drum set. It doesn't. I mean, it's just the nature of it.
It's the lack of cymbals is, I really think, the thing that kind of changes it more than the drums, right?
Yeah.
When you're not hearing that like high pitched tinny sound of the cymbal, it completely changes the atmosphere of the song. And I was listening to some live recordings that we did with a drummer for this song, which really wasn't worth pulling out, but we will pull out some of those for some of the later songs, more rocking songs. But one thing that just stands out to me is so much of the space is filled in by the sound of the crash, I guess.
Yeah.
And how it like carries over into some of these gaps in a way that everything has so much decay on Night Terrors. You hit a thing and then it stops. And it creates so much more syncopation, I guess, in the rhythms, but also atmosphere, which is what we were going for with everything. I think another thing is because I'm just beating on stuff, it sounds less amateurish. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but if you put me on a drum kit, I can hold a beat. But you're going to be like, that guy has no idea what he's doing on drums.
Yeah, exactly. Me too.
But you stick me on a back of a guitar, I have rhythm. And so all of a sudden, it's like, this actually sounds like a thing that's meant to sound like this in the song, right? Mm-hmm. And I obviously play like a guitar player, but I have these riffs in my head from the guitar in like a really intimate way of understanding the rhythm of the song, and I have no rules to guide me. So when I sit down with a back of a guitar, I don't know how I'm supposed to do it with this. I just do it in the way that I think fits and sounds good, and it's trial and error. So with this one, we found with Nolin, like trying to play these live, like it's actually pretty hard to recreate that.
Yeah,
like,
it is.
And it's, you know, you almost need the metronome in your ear to be able to play off of the metronome, because there's no real steady beat to the drums that I'm playing.
It completely changes. You know, I remember when you played that for the first time for me, just hearing that rhythm track, I love the sound, but like what you're playing is what you're getting in your head, but it's not it's a consistent beat. You're in time, but it's not a consistent pattern.
That's right.
And that would drive a drummer nuts, and I'm not a drummer, but I couldn't recreate that.
Well, I'll tell you.
You know, it's tough.
I still have drummers that are close friends of mine, and I approached them and asked them what they thought, and they said that everything was in time. That was the note. That was the note. Now, that's kind of a backhanded sort of compliment of like, okay, well, that's the bare minimum that you get. But no, this is not a drummer's record, right?
No.
But it is a creator's record, and I think people can feel that. But the approaches of the rhythms on the album, I think, are one of the things that make it so unique all around. And you know, honestly, were some of the most fun that I had while I was making it too, because I was completely out of my element and just creating, which is really fun. So at this point, I did some initial mixes, just kind of panning the stereo mics out and with some EQ. And when I listened back to this song with just like the rhythm guitar and the drums and the vocals before everything else was in there, that was the point where I realized, like, I think we can actually do this and make something that not just sounds really professional, but sounds really unique. And the problem that and this almost is probably contradictory to what most people would think, you can go on YouTube and figure out how to make stuff sound radio ready. Like, that's really easy to actually do with today's technology. It does not work for us as a band. Like, our talents don't lie in that, in being clean and doing things in an easy listening type way where those productions would work. It actually takes away from the character of our music. So we almost had to go in and like break all those rules and figure out different ways, doing almost the opposite of what they were telling us to do to get these sounds. But I do remember this as like the first moment where I listened to it and sent it to you guys and was just like, I think we can really do this. Like, I think we can do this in a way that we can get everything we want. It's not just going to sound like a home recording. Like, we can go beyond what we expect to do. And I think that's really cool. And it had a spook to it, right? Like, it had that atmosphere. Like, it had a vibe where it stood out. And that was that first moment, kind of that first night mixing, sitting here in the shed, where I realized that it was a thing. So then after this point, we go into the first recording session with the band. So where you guys come in with me on a Tuesday, Chop, you laid down the acoustic rhythm guitar at that point in time, which I guess you wrote, because I don't think I was strumming a guitar. It's definitely not what the guitar part was when I first wrote the song. You had kind of more of a quicker back and forth thing that you were doing.
Yeah.
We also tried some backing vocals at this point in time. One thing that we realized is that the key change screwed that up. So we were doing it before in D without much issue, but when we moved it up to E flat, all of a sudden things that we were trying to hit, we couldn't hit anymore. I think we also tried to get recordings with you, Chop, singing.
Yeah.
And then this was also kind of a point in time where we realized maybe it was better if I did the backing vocals too, because I had the time to sit here, but also the song was really being told from the main character's perspective. And as the stronger singer in the band, we weren't doing a lot of harmony at this point in time.
No.
Like, that wasn't something that we had really figured out yet. And, well, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But if any of you are wondering, what would it sound like with really bad backing vocals on Hand of God? We're about to play that for you, ladies and gentlemen. Also, make sure to pay attention to the lead vocals, too. We're going to make a decision about lead vocal sound quality down the road, and we'll talk to you about that. But it is something to pay attention to right here, just the way the vocals are coming through the speakers and the way they were recorded. So this is like the real recording session. So you're going to hear kind of final take on the guitar and stuff. I don't think I redid any of that. but with a little different vocal approach.
I traded all in for a song and some rowdy friends that'll sing along, or a night out neath the stars, witness the hand of God and rest my weary heart.
It's kind of, I think what I said earlier was like, no need to isolate them. You can tell that they're bad just by listening to them with all the other stuff going.
It was part of the process of experimentation. You know, I've told you this before, and not to sound too flowery, but this is basically a laboratory. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, really, because you were discovering stuff and then telling us about it, and you still know all of the details much more than we do.
Right, yeah.
But it's
Thank God I took notes. That's
yeah.
one of the biggest
Yeah.
things is I got a little notebook here that I could go back and like pull a lot of this stuff out of.
You're an extensive note taker, and something musically I want to point out on that version, that may be the first time on that chorus you do a quick change from one chord to another. If you listen to those earlier versions, you held that, I think it's a minor chord. You hold it longer. It gives it a unique sound, and I had trouble with that. And
Yeah.
still, you know, I've got to think about it because it's a quick jump that is not, and this is not a negative, but it's not the norm for most songs.
It is. That's very true. The problem is that I don't know that I do stuff like that.
I think that's what makes it interesting.
And then you're like looking at me like, why did you do that? And I'm like, I have no idea. But it is like yeah, it was something about the way that it landed with the vocals. It felt better to land on a minor and then jump to the major for the next line really quick. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
But I wanted to point that out because I think that little thing sets that song apart as much as anything else, because I'm in the world of bluegrass when I'm not playing with Fall Down Trees. When you hit a minor, you usually hold it for a certain number of beats.
Right.
And I you know, even though it's difficult, the difficulty doesn't make me not like it. It actually makes me like it. It's just you have to get used to it as a player. And I just wanted to point it out because I thought it was a really,
Well, there's
I think it sets it apart.
and there was a lot of like getting used to stuff as players that we did like
Yeah.
on this record, and I think that's a good thing to point out too. Like even with this song, it would have been very easy for us to record this with the Bob Dylan strumming,
Sure.
and a bluegrass bass line and a saxophone solo in the middle as a live 3-piece band.
And
Like we
would've-
probably could
it
have
would have
played.
sounded fine.
It would have, but it's not what it wouldn't have reached what we think it reached. And if you haven't noticed yet, we're really freaking proud of this record.
Yeah.
Like we really
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
We are not conceited individuals. We would tell you and have told you over the course of this the parts where we think we're playing garbage. We talk up to each other about that too, and when we think things are bad, and can kind of, that's one of the reasons I think we have the ability to do things that are really good, is like we have a level of trust where we can say, I think you can do better, mostly by joking at you and telling you that you played like crap, you know, or I think I can do better, or
Right.
let's try a different thing. Like that's
Yeah.
the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
That comes with us playing together so long. We don't start crying and, you know, whining when someone says, well, let's do that again.
right.
You, like, you
that
can-
ego's not there. Right?
No.
You know, it's sort of like, you know, the old saying, catching lightning in a bottle. This isn't catching lightning in a bottle. It's creating lightning in a bottle.
Hey, man,
and
that's
it
good.
takes a process. And we really can't write the formula down for you necessarily, but if you keep working at it, that's why we're so proud of it.
Whittling, if you will.
Yeah, whittling. That's a good analogy.
All right, so another thing that we tried, and this was the first night. So this was the night that you guys came in. We did the acoustic guitar. We tried some backing vocals. Porkchop had to take off, and we put some mics up, and Nolin recorded a keyboard track for us. So let's listen to that too.
Oh, God.
Totally forgotten about that.
Yeah, that's wild, isn't it? I had forgotten about it too until I listened to it, and I was like, man, I don't remember that at all. And once again, just like the sax thing, like your ear, Nolin, is good enough to be able to like pick out interesting counter melodies to what's going on in the song, and that's pretty much what you're doing there. But just like with the sax and just like with the backing vocals, these were all things where we just looked at it and we're like, it's not adding anything. No. As a matter of fact, it's taking away from other things that are going on. So let's just get it out of there.
If I remember right, now that it's, because I forgot you guys had recorded that, but I think the consensus we came to was, even though it was a counter melody, because of the way the piano is played, just in general, the way the instrument's played, it's almost canceling out the finger picking.
That's right. Yeah, they're working against each other.
That's what I was thinking. Is like the star of for me of the song is the finger picking. It's like you need to hear that finger picking over pretty much anything.
Well, that little we haven't touched on this, but one of the things that the finger picking brought was the down, 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 which is the hook, right? Like that's the thing in that song that takes it from a regular old strummed thing to something that has like a I don't even know what to call it. Like a different, I guess it's indie folk.
Yeah.
Like essentially is what it is. But
and you can hear that from the first take that you showed us. Like it goes from being sort of like a country folk song to what it is now, which it still has like country vibes. Like a lot of this album does. It's just the way we are. But
mostly my accent.
Yeah. But you can see how much it is grown from something that's,
more straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Another thing we did that night, Nolin, that was really cool and I think changed the way this was all going to go, is you sat at the piano and were picking the vocal lines out by ear, which is something I can't do. And then after you picked the vocal lines out by ear, you started playing the harmonies for me. And so as you and then we were trying to sing them, like trying to record some backing vocals. And so, you picked out the third, and then we would try to sing the third, and then you picked out the fifth, and we would try to sing the fifth, and then you picked out the sixth, and we tried to sing the sixth. And I'd never been able to hear that before. Like, I'd never been able to hear another person sing and know where the third or the fifth or the sixth was. And since I was hearing Nolin playing those things, I was able to match my voice to what he was playing on the piano, and then all of a sudden I could hear him. And that was a totally new experience to me. And even though we didn't use them on this song, I used that everywhere else on the record, right? Like Night Terrors, we'll talk about that next episode. I think it's 5-part harmony or something ridiculous that I ended up doing in the long run. Like, so much of what ended up, and I think the backing vocals on this album are one of the things that makes it stand out. Either it's Crosby, Stills, and Nash style backing vocals on like Shadow, or it is whatever madness in Night Terrors with the two lead vocals like battling with each other the whole time. The vocal approach to the album is the thing that sets it apart. It's the thing I was most nervous about coming in because I don't consider myself a great singer, and it ended up being a thing that I'm always complimented on when people listen to the record, mostly because they're surprised it sounds as good as it does, which I don't know how I should feel about that. But also because it is a distinguishing factor of the album is how those vocals interact. So the next week, Nolin was out sick, and so it was just me and you, Chop. And earlier in the week, I had tried to we didn't have a bass line for this song.
No.
And so I had tried to sit down and play bass, and it was sounding so bad. Like everything sounded like garbage. Not just what I was playing, but the way it was coming through, on the recording, it was like I wasn't in time. It was, and I'm not a bass player, right? Just like I'm not a drummer. I know where the notes are. I should be able to at least make it sound good and in key. And it just was not working. So Porkchop, you came in on that Tuesday, and then you tried to sit down and play some bass lines, and it also sucked and sounded really bad. And then we realized that the bass track was not working in time with the pre-recorded songs. And this was a really freaking scary moment because we were adjusting the buffer size and stuff, and it just was not working. It was just out of sync. Every time we would try to overdub, it was just out of sync. And we worked on this for a really long time. And freaking out, oh my God, we're going to have to scrap this entire project. But we finally figured out, I got a new hi-fi stereo system. And I had hooked the hi-fi stereo system up to the computer to be able to listen to stuff through the big speakers, instead of just my studio monitors. And it had changed the buffer and the sample size of the thing. And so all we had to do was switch the buffer and the sample size back to the original. and it worked perfect. And I made a big note in bold notes in my note not to ever forget that that's what happens. And we ended up not having any more issues with that for the rest of the time. But that doesn't mean the bass line came easy to us.
No.
So, you mentioned this Porkchop. You're a bluegrass guy.
Yeah.
Have been for a long time. And your natural tendency is to fall back to bluegrass bass lines.
1, 4, 5, rocking back and forth.
That's exactly right. And you're really good. And walks.
And
you do good walks.
I do blues walks. That's what I do.
That's right. But we were really trying to break that mold. And so we came across and did some searches and came across some videos of James Jamerson style bass playing.
May he rest in peace.
May he rest. And, implementing the 1, the 5, and then the octave in a way and like bouncing back and forth on the beat. Neither of us are in that category at all.
Yeah, I want to point out, we are not saying that we are in any way even... Look, we're not in the same area code as James Jamerson, but that video did give us some ideas.
It did. And then it was also the rhythm of the song was in my head from playing the back of that guitar and from the and from the thing. And so but you have better hands. Like you're a bass player. And so what we started doing, and this is something that kind of carried us through the whole recording process, is like I would pick up the bass and I would like play something weird that I couldn't successfully do over and over and over again, but kind of matching the rhythm in a way that was outside of that bluegrass structure. And then you would take that thing and I would hand the bass back to you, and then you would incorporate that into your more like bass ability, right? To actually being able to play the notes more solid and to be able to incorporate that. And we would sort of pass the bass back and forth until we landed on a thing that worked for both of us. There's a couple of songs on here that I did play the bass, but this is one where you played the final bass track.
Pluck and pass.
And look, that was a lot of fun. That was us creating like in the room. And once again, if we were an egocentric band, there would have probably been a lot of, pissed off people about that. But for us, it was just like, how do we get the best sound? How do we make this sound and come up with the best part that we possibly can? And just like all the best stuff, it took us all, right? Like it took everybody to be able to figure out everything. And this was no different. So we also tried some different recording stuff with the bass. So we tried the 2 condenser approach that I was using for vocals in stereo and that I was using for guitar in stereo. And we put those mics in front of the bass cabinet, but we don't have a real bass cabinet. So we were using a PA speaker as our bass cabinet or bass speaker. And it did not sound good. It sounded thin. So this was the first time that I broke the stereo microphone rule and pulled out a SM58 and sat it in front of the bass cab and just did it the normal way. But one thing that I did do here is I doubled it when I was mixing it. So just like with stereo where I end up with 2 tracks, and I could pan one track a little to the left and one a little to the right to create thickness in the instruments. I did the same thing with bass. I just duplicated the same track and then panned them out. And so that actually helped out a ton down the road too, recording electric guitars and stuff, and also the final vocal takes that we ended up doing. So, but I think this is another moment where we listened back to this after we got the final bass take down and we're like, oh man, this is actually a thing that could be really good. Like this is something like we did this in the room. We did not know this song would ever sound like this, and it sounds better than we ever imagined it would. So here's an isolated bass track. I think that's one of your better bass lines there, Porkchop, and one of the better things that we came up with. And it's not what anybody would think would fit into that particular song.
No, and not to keep going back to this, but I mean, it pushed me outside of my comfort zone, which sometimes can be bad, sometimes can be good, but I think you need to be open to it. If something's going to work, give it the old college try, as they say, and the idea of us passing it around, it seemed to, I don't know, not just with the bass, but like you said, we all worked together on this we wanted this project to be something that was a good project.
Absolutely.
Not like, hey, look how good I can play this instrument or how great I sing or play the saxophone or whatever.
We wanted to make a really good album.
We wanted it to be an album by a band the way that we wanted it. And it took, I mean, it was really a learning process completely all the way through.
Yep. In every level, like the recording and the producing, also the mixing, which is what kind of came next after this. So I worked on the mixes of this song because it was the first one that we did, probably more than the mixes of any other song, just because it was there the whole time, right? And I would sort of sporadically go back and work on it. It's trial and error. Like I did it a dozen different ways to create different sounds and figuring out different ways of doing it. And ended up, it took all the way until the end, like all the way until we already had a release date and everything, and I was doing the final masters and went back and did one more mix to really get it exactly where we wanted it. And honestly, I probably could have done it another 20 times after that, but I was like, all right, we already set a date. I gotta wrap this one up. We took a break from recording in June, so we started in February, and this was the first song we did, and we rolled kind of straight through every week until June. And everybody kind of did some vacations and stuff, played some live shows, and really, I had considered pretty much we were wrapped at that point in time. I wanted to give my ears like a rest before I dug into the final mixes. This is the point in time, though, where I reconnected with the guys from Guttersville. So a little Guttersville background. Nate and me and really the whole crew, like we used to play around here together 15 years ago, before we had families and kids and all of that, and we played pretty regularly, and this was an idea that we tossed around then and we're thinking about doing. And so I'm not sure how Nate and I reconnected, but it turns out the same thing I'd been doing. Now, we've been playing gigs, not a lot, but we've gigged kind of consistently over the 15 years, unlike most of the other guys. But we'd been writing songs and talking about making records. Well, it turns out all of those dudes had been doing the same thing too. And so I kind of reconnected with them, got on board with what they were doing sort of right at the launch. We missed the first compilation just because it came out like 2 weeks after we started messing around with them, and we hadn't really been working on anything. At this point in time, we very much thought we were going to release the album in the fall. Like it was probably going to be like an October or maybe November release for us as we were finishing it up. But we wanted to throw together a single to go on the Halloween compilation for Guttersville. And so while we were sort of taking a break from the recording and mixing and everything for Night Terrors, we did the 1 in 18 single, which is on the Strang Tales from Guttersville Halloween compilation. You can find that on Spotify and Apple Music and everywhere. Guttersville Records, but 1 in 18, song that didn't fit on the album or anything. One Porkchop you and I wrote a long time ago and we had floating around, and I thought it fit the Halloween vibe. And so when we recorded that song, I did the vocals a different way. I sang into the mic that I'm talking into right now, which is a Shure SM7B dynamic mic, and I got a much thicker, cleaner, more present vocal. But the other thing that I noticed is I can hear it so much better in my headphones that when I was doing the backing vocals were all tighter and more precise, and everything just sounded 1,000 times better. I didn't like it early on in the recording process, but that's because I didn't know how to mix and use effects to my advantage without being too heavy-handed with them. But at this point, I'd kind of figured that part out. And so I made this really, 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 really terrible decision. And in late September, early October, I kind of had a conversation with you guys like, I think I need to re-record all the vocals. And if you consider how long we'd been working on this at that point in time, what we were working towards, it's our debut album, so we don't really have anything else to push. We've got all this stuff we're really excited to get out there and let people hear, to say, all right, well, Dustin's going to take another month and a half to redo a thing that's already done. Probably wasn't very exciting to hear. I will tell you this, I hated it. I hated the idea of having to go back and redo that, because a lot of moments were captured in those initial recordings that I wasn't sure I could recreate. And you were talking about lightning in the bottle, like, is my singing going to be better the second go around? I think it was because I could hear better, but there were things that were lost that we didn't get back. There were things that kind of disappeared after those first takes. But all in all, I also think it made the quality of the album jump by leaps and bounds, and I'm so glad that we did it. So yeah, I went back. Now at this point, you guys, we were like recording some other stuff. I can't remember. We were prepping for maybe some Christmas shows. So we decided while I was doing this, we also made a Christmas EP. I Wish You Would, which is still available out there if you want to go listen to some Christmas music right now.
Yeah.
It's really good, I think. We were pretty proud of it. But it is out there on Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon and all of those places too. I Wish You Would by Fall Down Trees. So we were doing kind of other stuff while I was working on these mixes, and it was allowing us to like test things out. And part of that was distribution too. This was the first full-length album from Guttersville, so we'd put out some compilations and stuff, but we hadn't done a full album launch like this yet. And so we had to populate all of our band pages and all of that stuff, and so I Wish You Would gave us an opportunity to do that so we could make sure when it was time to release Night Terrors that we had all of that dialed in and knew exactly what was going to happen. Mastering was the same thing. I'm going to tell you, like, once again, I was like watching YouTube videos to try to figure out like what I needed to do and all of this. That was probably the most frustrating part of the entire record. That was one of the few times where I was like, can I raise enough money to just pay somebody to do this for me? Because I'm not enjoying this. But it ended up being the same thing, right? It was just like, once I just dropped YouTube and said, all right, what are my goals? It can't be too loud to go on the platforms, and the songs need to have the same volume when you listen to them. Well, most people on a record, the songs kind of sound the same. They have a very similar instrumentation. The drums are all about the same loudness on each song. The bass is about the same loudness on this song. All of our songs are like movies. Every one is completely individual in the tone of every instrument, in the volume of each instrument, and how they're mixed together. You know, like Shadow, the vocals are very much the most present song, Hand to God too, whereas something like Night Terrors, the vocals are more buried down into the mix with the roaring guitars. And so it ended up just being me sitting here multiple nights for hours on end with everything in a different track, adjusting volume by 1 decibel here or there until I got it where I wanted it to get. But eventually we got there, right? Eventually it was done. It was ready to be released. And the results that we got out of this song and the rest of the record were better than anything we could have hoped for. So you folks have been here with us for more than an hour now, it looks like. So why don't we play you the final mastered version? This is from the album Night Terrors by Fall Down Trees, Hand of God.
I'll head on down the road a ways. Nothing left to do, nothing left to prove, nothing left to say. It's not like you gave 2 shits anyway. I guess I'll head on down the road. I guess I tried to do my best most days. Too stubborn to leave, too numb to grieve, too dumb to pray. It wouldn't have made any difference anyway. I guess I tried to do my best, and I traded all in for a song and some rowdy friends that'll sing along, or a night out neath the stars to witness the hand of God and rest my weary heart. Guess I'll take care of myself this time. Reconnect with friends, let the wounded mend, find a place that's mine. I'll never fail if I never try. Try to take care of myself. This ain't the time or place for me, my friend. Too many open eyes, too many righteous cries, too many rules to bend. I need to learn to love myself again. This ain't the time or place for me. And I trade it all in for a song and some rowdy friends that'll sing along, or a night out 'neath the stars to witness the hand of God and rest my weary heart.
That was Hand of God from the debut album from Fall Down Trees, Night Terrors. Now available on all streaming services, not just that song, but the entire album. Go stick it on your playlists, share it with your friends, do all that good stuff. One thing I do want to note quickly is that the ending of the song, we cut that last verse out, and we also cut the refrain out that used to end the end of the song. So Porkchop actually had, I was just ending in a resolution, a resolve back to the one. Porkchop had an idea to leave it on that 4, I guess it is.
Yeah, it's a bluegrass thing. Well, it's specifically, now there are lots of folks that do this, but there's a lot of Alison Krauss and Union Station songs that end on a 4 and a 1-4-5 progression, and I love it. I absolutely love it, and I always pull it out with the bluegrass group I play with, and I was thinking, I said, man, that would sound really cool, and I think it does.
I think it does too, and not only that, but it was also a perfect lead-in to the next song.
Right.
You know, it like leaves you hanging in this way, and then when that electric guitar comes in for Night Terrors,
It
like it
jolts you.
kicks you in the
Yeah.
face.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it does. A little bit of a jump scare for the next album or next track.
No, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely have terrified a few people with that song. So I actually had one person ask, "You're going to resequence this, right? You're not going to make those songs go back to back?" And I was like, "No, that's exactly what we want." I'm going to say this too, that second half of the second verse, and he says, I say it's he, like it ain't me. And that's one weird thing. I've listened to this so much and I've done so much to it. It's almost like it's not us that I'm listening to anymore.
Yeah.
It's like it's other people that no longer exist, the past us. But the line, "This ain't the time or place for me, my friend. Too many open eyes, too many righteous cries, too many rules to bend. I need to learn to love myself again. This ain't the time or place for me." That was obviously something that I was feeling really strongly at that point in time in my life. And then not just that, but just like in society at this point in time in the world, I feel very isolated in a lot of ways. Some of that existential dread that pops up through, that's a theme in this album too. Like it's not just this interior dread and worry and self-loathing and all this, but it's also existential things that are, and outside things pushing in like on me that are causing these feelings. But that's also the approach to the music. And we very much made a record that doesn't sound like anything that anybody makes now, right? Like it really doesn't. And the too many rules to bend part, like, I mean, all that stuff is there. Like this is not how we were supposed to do it. And I think that's one of the reasons I love it so much. Is it's almost like I proved a point. We were talking earlier, like, and you were talking about the ambition is there, and you don't like get to play a lot with that level of ambition or record a lot. I mean, I always have all of the crazy ambition, but seldom do I actually get the full follow through. And so this is one instance where we ended up overshooting where we thought we were gonna land. We went beyond it, and we actually finished it and completed it and got it released. And now we're doing a podcast about it. So it was just like we went even beyond there. And that whole like, I need to learn to love myself again. Like, that's the confidence in myself as a human being, but also like as an artist and as a musician at that point in time, to say we still have this ability. Like, we're good enough and unique enough, and what we do is worthy of this. And anyway, that, I think that line just really kind of resonates throughout the entire record. Even though this is the first song, our character hasn't realized it yet. But by the time that he realizes he's got wings, he's just a pig with wings at the end, I think it may be the overall theme.
We were coming back from Asheville listening to it, and I think I told Dustin, it's hard to think this is us.
Yeah, right?
It's like, when, especially, we were listening through the album, I got like halfway through it, it's like, wait a minute, this is our album.
Right? And the way that it listens as a whole album instead of song by song. So yeah, that Asheville trip, we were coming back from seeing MJ Linderman. This was right around Christmas. Maybe Christmas Eve, actually.
Yeah.
And so we're riding back an hour and a half so we can listen to the whole record. And I think that was the first time you had heard it all the way through.
All the way through, yeah.
And it was the first time I had heard like the final mixes through the car stereo and just listening and not criticizing, right? Like, this is the done thing. And yeah, that was definitely a moment of like, it's crazy that first of all, that this is of a piece, like all the way through, and it fits so well, but also that we're the ones that did it.
And I'll add too, I know that this, you were talking about going back and redoing vocals and things like that, but as far as that initial recording, once we started recording the album in earnest, I think that if we didn't have some successes in this first song, the rest of it may not have happened.
Absolutely.
It may have been a bunch of singles, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Or we may have switched to the country songs.
Yeah.
Right?
And because that's generally our wheelhouse, is the more blues and country based things. So this is the ambitious part. But for me, watching you discover things on the editing end and the production end, and then us, I mean, I've known you guys for like 10 plus years, but when you get in a recording session with anybody, it can be tense.
Absolutely.
And there is an internal pressure to put out something that is going to come across, and you hope that resonates with whoever's listening to it. But like, I didn't feel any pressure from you guys, and I hope I didn't put any pressure.
Not at all.
And to hear what we did, even though we went back and did some more editing on it and some more recording, the idea that we could make a song and it sound as good as it did in a shed with 3 people and no drummer, you name all this stuff off. It's I don't want to be too bold here, but there's those little miracles, like, we don't have a drummer, well, but we still have percussion.
And look, it's not the first time we tried to do this. Like, we've gone into studio after studio and tried to record, and it sounds like garbage. It didn't fit us. It wasn't anything they were doing wrong. They just didn't understand us as a band.
Yeah.
And what we got was radio-ready stuff that just doesn't match our personality. We've tried recording ourselves through the years with the same equipment, but usually we have to set it up and tear it down, and it's a whole process, and we're always trying to do things live. This was relaxed and collaborative in a way, and I agree. I mean, I think part of it is the fact that we didn't really expect anybody to listen.
Yeah.
Like, we did not think about the listener as anything other than just a gray figure in the distance, right? There were no expectations to this at all. Honestly, folks, we have been absolutely blown away by the number of people that listen to this thing, listen over and over, that have reached out to us, complimented us about it. Like, that like has lifted me. It's the neighbor's dog whining, if everybody can hear that. That has lifted me up in a way that I did not expect. When we put it out, I could have never expected as good of a response as we've gotten. And so I hope for you folks, like, listening to this right now and hearing these songs for the first time, you'll go listen to the whole album and then come back for more of these podcast episodes. But for the folks that have been listening already and are just getting the little extra nuggets right now and eating it up, like, we really, really, really appreciate you. Like, we really do. It means so much that first you gave it a shot. Like, how much stuff shows up in your news feeds all the time, but you took the time to, like, listen the first go around. And now the comments that we get about, I've listened 4 times now, and that's the kind of artist that we want to be. Is the ones that grow on you, and like a fungus. Once we grow on you, you can't get rid of us, and you don't quite understand why. That's what we want to be. So we really do appreciate that. And also, thanks for listening to Does It Make a Sound? We'll be back in a couple of weeks with episode 2, Night Terrors, where we'll be focusing on the title track from the album. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, review the show on your favorite podcasting platform. Do it right now. Do it now. You can also stay up to date with Does It Make a Sound and Fall Down Trees in general by following Fall Down Trees on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. We're all over the place. And we'll have links in the descriptions of the podcast too. As independent artists, we need champions to spread the word about our work. So if you find value in our music or this podcast, please also share it with your friends on your social media channels too. That's more valuable to us than any advertising we could ever afford. And if you do it, we'll be forever in your debt, I promise. Does It Make a Sound and Fall Down Trees are also proud partners of Guttersville Records, a collective of independent artists working together to be heard in a noisy digital space. So please like and subscribe to Guttersville channels too, and make sure to listen to all of the music coming out right now from our little indie record label. There's lots of good stuff being released, and eventually maybe we'll get a chance to talk about it on this podcast too. All right, fellers. Thanks for listening to the show. And for all your support, sincerely. For Porkchop Branch and for Nolin McAlister, I'm Dustin Owens.
Timber!